do you understand how rewarding it is to have the ability to purchase a property and hand it to your parents and tell them, here, hard work and dedication? Does that make any sense? Yeah, so this is the type of stuff that I'm telling you. It's all about perspective. On the other hand, had my mom backing me up. And now that I read this, I'm like, oh my God, we all have somebody that's verbally abusive to us, that doesn't want to work, even in your own personal relationships. I'm always very careful with my wife. I'm like, we need to make sure that we are saying positive things to one another. You know what I mean? Because we come from a culture that's very used to playing a blame game type of thing. So create a healthy environment. And I know if I was you guys, I would go back home and I would talk about this little boy and share that perspective. You know what I mean? And trust me, my wife, she always tells me, why do you need motivational books? Like, you don't have motivation enough. And to me, I don't have motivation enough, even though I seem motivated, but we got to feed our mind. But to make a very long story short, she has now embraced and seen a change in me where she's like, okay, what are you doing? So I'm like, let me have your Audible. I downloaded the Audible app. I connected it to her phone. And I have her reading The Power of Habits now, and I'm seeing a lot of change. So the reason I'm saying that is you guys can control your environment. Today, you guys make a decision to write a specific story. What's your story going to say? And to me is, I got to make sure that I'm telling my kids and feeding them mentally what they need to hear. Does that make sense? Anyway, back to closing costs. So closing costs, there's something called prorations and there's something called taxes. This is the hardest thing, especially for you guys, since you guys are new. You know how hard it is to explain junk fees to customers? Because after a while, you're talking about so much junk fees that it's like, okay, I think I've already said taxes and service fee like 10 times. You see what I'm saying? But you guys have to have a clear understanding of what every part of the closing cost or net sheet has. If you understand it, you can go like, I see so many real estate people and I'm like, explain the transfer tax to the customer. They can't give an explanation about the transfer tax. What's the transfer tax? Nobody knows what the transfer tax is. And it's very simple. You just work on your business and you Google things and then you put them into practice. Good thing is that you guys have a shortcut to that. So I don't want to go on a tangent because thank you for bringing up the question, but I usually say 2%. So for example, do the numbers right now. If you guys want to write them down, do them in your head. $500,000. A $500,000 sell, what's 2% of $500,000?
It's 10,000.
That's 10,000. That sounds about the right average for closing cost on 500,000. Now let's do it for 300,000. What's 2%?
300,000?
6,000.
Yeah.
So those closing costs sound about right. And the reason why is because escrow has a set amount. I believe it's about $2.50 per thousand. Does that make sense, Edward?
Absolutely.
Or $2, $2.25, it depends. Some escrows work flat fees. Some customers will be very, very knowledgeable on their fees and costs because they've done this repeatedly. So this is the ones that I love. I've already bought 10 houses. I know how everything works. Like, okay, hey. Still doesn't change the fact that there's these cold hard numbers here and then they don't like them. Some customers, when they're looking at closing costs, they have fixed dollar amounts in their mind because there was another realtor that I had already planted a negative seed of like, I can do it with zero closing costs. And then you ask yourself, wow, we're in a different marketplace. Nobody's doing it. There's always closing costs involved. Does that make any sense?
It doesn't matter if it's cash or
it does not matter.
Okay, it's all
you
the same.
still got closing costs. That's the bottom line. That's why the question is very, very important.
Even if it's for sale by owner, you still have closing costs.
Even if it's for sale by owner.
Just letting you guys know.
And it's more lower the closing cost for the cash, right? And whether they have at the
Yes,
loan.
because you don't have prorations and stuff.
Yes,
you still have
yes,
to do that.
yes, it is. So see, the thing is that you just opened up a can of worms. So.
Yeah. Let's not go there.
Yeah, no. So look, cash. If it's cash, there's no finance cost. Finance cost, if you talk to your lender, is anywhere from $2,500 to $3,500. Underwriting, appraisal. Yes.
So I guess most agents' mistake is the only difference between recurring and non-recurring closing costs. So there's closing costs towards your escrow and title, and then there's non-recurring closing costs.
Right.
The non-recurring closing costs is where all the loan stuff, everything goes to put into it.
Yeah.
That's
and,
a long.
And look, a lot of this lingo is brand new. A lot of this lingo is brand new to people that are jumping on the program. You need to understand this stuff, which is another kind of worms, the recurring and non-recurring closing costs. These are things that I need you to know. But for the sake of making sure we stay on time, closing costs are typically about 2% of the purchase price. Can it extend more? Yes. I've seen some buyers that are paying 2% for an interest rate right now, and that would wipe out automatically the 2% that you're getting credited, if you're getting credited, or the 2% that's there. Does that make sense? So it's really up to the loan. Like if you want to get into the details of what closing costs really involve, I have to ask you questions about your loan. I have to ask you questions about what type of finance. I have to ask you about, are you paying your homeowner's insurance up front? There's a bunch of things that are involved. But to answer your question, it's about 2%. And since you asked that question, I'm going to give you guys a breakdown starting tomorrow from our 10-minute session on what closing costs. What happens when you start to put in cash deals? What happens when you start to do finance deals? Even refinance have closing costs, and the prorations are what take a much larger chunk of the fees. Does that make sense?
Is it typically like always around 2%, or does it vary from escrow to escrow company? Like one escrow has maybe 3%, 2.5%, and then this one is 2%. Like how does picking your escrow come into consideration?
Yes.
Want me to answer that one?
Yeah.
So the escrow companies are all work different, but they're all similar. They have a base and for every 1,000. Don't worry about that end because that's the way escrow companies work unless you're on the listing side. However, closing costs, it depends. 2% is a rule of thumb, but if you want a buffer, it's 3% purchase price because then you have to add recurring and non-recurring closing costs.
So how do you know which escrow to even work with?
Well, here's the thing. If you want to here's the story I want to continue guys to tell you because I want you guys to stay. I want you guys to be present in your transactions. The industry has told us in the past that we need to be mega massive producers of real estate. And I get that. Everybody goes to these panels where you have this guy that looks fantastic that's selling 1 million homes a year. You're wondering how you're going to get there. Be very mindful of your transactions that you have right now. We'll get there. We'll get to that level, but be mindful of that one deal that you have. Take care of that customer, close that customer, and let's move on. And then we could recreate it. Does that make any sense? But what I want to really push on today is, I think when it comes down to the closing cost, I think you need to do your research because I do my research. Like right now, we have a sale that's on Beaver. The guy wants a net sheet. He needs to provide all the proper documentation so that we can provide him that net sheet. Does that make sense? Right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So this is what I want to explain to you guys. When it comes down to closing costs are completely negotiable. They're negotiable during the transaction, and they're negotiable before the transaction, but they're not negotiable after the transaction. A customer cannot find out that something went wrong with the property after the fact and then try to go after you. Well, they can legally, but what I'm saying is that they can't go and be like, hey, can you give me some cost for closing because there was an issue with the property. You could only do that before, after home inspection, and then you do your request. Does that make any sense to you guys?
Yes.
So that's a big topic.
It's a huge topic.
Yeah, it's a very big topic, and I think that's one of those things where I'm going to talk to David so David could also come here and explain his portion of the closing costs because there's a lot of fees that are associated. And I agree with you guys. I've had a lot of objections in the last 3 months just based on closing costs. Yes.
Also with, since I'm purchasing my house right now,
Yeah.
David was trying to tell me the difference between lender paid and borrower paid. It went over my head, so that's another topic.
That's another thing. Thank you for bringing that up because I'm documenting that now.
Let's not go through that one right now.
Well,
That's gonna be
borrower paid is a whole different monster. But see, look, let me tell you guys something. Isn't that how beautiful our business is? Like, we're true professionals. Like, when people tell me, oh, you're just going to sell my house, it's like, no. I'm not just going to sell your house. There's a lot of stuff that I'm going to do to sell your house. Yes.
Our last transactions, you've been changing it up where we actually let the seller make a decision on escrow company. We become neutral.
Right.
We give them 3 estimates. Here are your estimates. So we don't choose which one's better for them.
Yeah. Oh, that's what I was going to say before I forgot. I forget everything. I'm so bad at it.
You're good.
Is there pills for that? Do they have pills?
Adderall.
No? Adderall.
Sprayers.
Yeah, there's sprayers. There you go. So you're going to sell real estate to people that you know. You're going to sell real estate to people that you don't know. I was in the habit of referring my own service providers, my escrow company, blah, blah, blah. Tell me why some family friends decide to buy a house with me. And I'm like, yeah, I love you guys. You guys are great. Best friends, right? Showing the house, got them into a house. I thought I got them a spanking good deal, did everything. Send over the inspector that I had selected. the inspector that I had selected went over to the house, and somehow in the report, he missed a huge foundation crack. And the reason I laugh about that is because it gets worse. So he missed a huge foundation crack. He also missed the cracks that were on the exterior of the home in the back. The buyers were so excited. I was their friend, I'm their broker. You know, he's doing everything right. I referred this home inspector. This home inspector went over there, and I even remember vividly, like, you know what I'm saying, leaving a hug, like, what's up, bro? Like, you know what I'm saying? Now that I go back and think about it, I'm like, man, that looks so shady. It's so, it's like, man, I almost like, did I pay him in cash? You know what I'm saying? So anyway, 6 months later, I get a phone call, and they're like, hey, you know, everything's all good. Can you come over to the house? We want to show you something that's been our concern. And go into the home, and the whole back is super cracked. Like, just stuff is just falling apart. Go to the outside, it's cracking. And I'm like, hey, the only thing I can recommend is let's do a home warranty. So they said, let's do a home warranty. Great. And I said, but first, the home warranty said, get another inspection. You know what I mean? We got to see what happened during the transaction or whatnot. We send the second inspector, and the second inspector sent us a full report just on foundation. On his report, he wrote that this had been a problem for like more than 6 months. It's been like a 3-year pre-existing problem. And all of a sudden, my friends are no longer my friends so much. So the reason that I'm telling you guys this is that we got to get into the habit, to answer your question, is providing 3 different service providers. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I've been doing with the home inspections too. Like, hey, here's 3 people that you guys can go and hire. Once you tell me, then I'll be more than happy to schedule the actual appointment with the person, but I need to make sure it comes from you. Because in the eye of the consumer, what it looks like is Abraham took me to his people, they hooked me up, but that hookup wasn't a hookup. They were trying to prey on me. Does that make sense? The right word to use on that? They were trying to take advantage of me. There was a conspiracy to commit fraud against me. So when we get into the breaking down of closing costs tomorrow, I'll make sure to give you the 3 different options that you should be providing for your consumer, even if they're buying. The issue with that is that you have to get the seller to accept its terms. We had a huge issue in the real estate industry because the people that were in charge of the legal departments considered that steering. Like, why should the seller steer the buyer into using a service provider? So they kind of left that alone, and it's still very negotiable. I don't know if you guys have seen on your residential purchase agreements, it says who pays service selection, which is escrow and title. And we had a huge issue with that. But as of that result, we have to still provide 3 of everything, like even 3 title officers or 3 title companies and all that stuff. Do most people get into the habit of doing that? I would say 99.9% of people don't structure that. Does that make any sense to you guys? So what I want you guys to do is I want you guys to tomorrow come in committed to making sure you guys are taking note on closing costs. It's a game changer. For me, I love to know that I can talk to a consumer about closing costs without calling somebody, because I want to take control of my business right now. So I'm happy you're asking those questions. You got to make sure that the book you're writing today, Teresa, is a book that's better for tomorrow. Like, I'm going to be able to answer all the questions that the consumer has, the customer, the client has, for me to answer it versus, oh man, okay, let me get back to you. And it's still okay to get back to people, because I always tell people I still have to order your payoffs. We still have to find out with the lender. We have to find out about your credit. We have to do a bunch of other things. But to answer your question and wrap it up, is 2% is very, very, very comfortable for closing costs. Does that make any sense? So we don't forget our technique with script. I have been practicing the buyer pre-qualification script. Even though I know it very well and I ask the questions all the time, I had a hot call come in yesterday. I was able to wrap up the whole deal in about 10 minutes. And I shot that one to Hiram, and Hiram's all like, this guy's fully converted already. He says, you did the whole work. David's already going to pre-qualify him. He owns a business. He does like HVAC and all that stuff. He's living I rated his motivation, and in his motivation, he says, I'm living with my brother renting a bedroom because I sold my house in Antelope Valley. I need to buy now. So he says, qualify me, let's go. I need to be in the house for 30 days. The only reason I was able to find that out is because I stuck to my buyer pre-qual script. I'm doing it all the time. Even when people call me just to kind of like, hey, I know you're doing real estate and you could do it, but we thinking of buying, and I go straight into the what's your motivation for buying? And it's like, oh, it's because she's pregnant. And I'm like, oh, cool, she's pregnant, fantastic. You know what I'm saying? And I go, okay, have you, any challenges? Have you been facing any challenges? And then they start to opens up a whole can of everything, and all of a sudden it's like he gave me all the tools I needed for me to take action. But some of us like, yeah, he wants to buy it. Hey, I'm gonna buy it. We finish it.
Actually,
You know what I'm saying?
yeah, I wasn't properly I'm just admitting it. I wasn't properly qualifying my sellers whenever I got my listings, and
Right.
now I'm having problems like actually getting them sold. I'm getting sign calls and it's generating.
Yes.
leads, but at the same time, I learned from that mistake as well.
And I've been
deep enough into it.
And I've been having this conversation with Edward specifically on how good your ability to make sure you're running through the first initial steps. 90% of people in the industry can't even get through the fact that they have to make phone calls. Look at Teresa's follow-up game. She's beating 90% of the industry because she's following up with people that she's talked to 6 months ago. And even though it's not at 100 unit a year level, she's gonna make a living and survive through this economy no matter what. So all you got to do now is better on the pre-qual script. I can't stress out the pre-qual script enough because it tells me several things. There's a very specific question. How much down payment are you working with? If you're telling me you got 10,000 for down payments, like I'm gonna send you down the street. Because yeah, something like I just the thing is that you have to start to attract what you guys want. And that's why we've set up these masterminds. But tomorrow, so buy your pre-qual script. Buy your pre-qual script. Buy your pre-qual script. Always buy your pre-qual script. Do it. Do it for yourself. Do it for your family. And remember, you guys are in control of that car. You want to lose control, stop practicing your buyer pre-qual scripts. And right now, I've been giving you guys access, a little more access to a checklist that we made because we want you guys to take control of your real estate career. There's no way that people are in an industry where they can't yield $10,000 a month. I'm like, all the tools are here. We have everything in front of us. We just got to make sure we take action. So this morning, your prospecting block, you guys are going to start getting the leads. Call those leads immediately. If you don't have access to Redx, we have access to Redx. We have all the tools that you guys need in order for you guys to be calling people. If you guys consciously choose not to call, that's on you. I have a listing appointment because I'm trying to create inventory for you guys to be able to sell it. It's a property in Mission Hills with 2 lots. It's going to be one of those where maybe even your 750 guy can come and submit an offer. So wish me luck, guys.